Welcome to the Oh Brother podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, is my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
How's it going, Dan?
Hey, man, and I can't believe it's another week already. I feel like I just said it was June 20th.
Yeah, it's flown by.
So we're at June 27, 2020. And this is an episode we weren't necessarily planning to do. And so, but we felt it was topical and just something in the news that kind of caught our attention. And
yeah, it's all over the news right now.
Thought we would jump on and talk a little bit about it and share our opinions about it. So we're talking about the news that came out on Thursday that Disney has made a decision to change the theming for their Splash Mountain attraction in both Disneyland and Disney World.
Yes.
And why have they made that decision? Now, you read the Disney Parks blog update, right?
Right.
And so and actually, you know what, before we dive into the material, I did want to give a shout out to a friend of the show who has been gracious enough to provide the music for our podcast. So when you hear our intro and you hear our outro, that is done by Dave Diaz. And if you want to hit Dave up, if you're looking for some music for your own podcast or for some other reason, you can certainly feel free to connect with Dave. He is at Rev Drum, which is REV as in Victor, Drum, DRUM. And you can find him on social media. And his credits are in the episode notes as well. So thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Appreciate your contribution. Great. Yep, sounds awesome. We love it. It's got that sweet 70s, 80s feel.
Should make a note that the early episodes, it wasn't Dave. It was
good
something
point.
We were using called, what was it called?
If I Had a Chicken?
If I Had a Chicken was the original theme. So we decided to go with Dave and something original, which we like.
And I got to say, it basically sort of gave him a quick pitch of what the show was about. And he just came up with it. And immediately, I remember when I heard it and I shared it with you, I was like, oh my God, I immediately think of that 80s synthesizer and the 80s movies like Wall Street or any movie from back in the 80s.
Yeah,
so
any John Hughes movie.
Yeah, that's right. It's an easy gig. It's a midnight run, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the meat of the conversation. So Disney makes this announcement to change, and
it impacts us because we're not necessarily talking about Disney or the ride. We're talking about because it's based on a song. That ride is based on a movie, and a movie that was made in 1946, which have you ever seen it? You probably have never seen it.
No, and I think it seems like the last time it was released was like in 86, maybe the 40th anniversary. It's been in the vaults for a long time.
And it's never been released in the US on any kind of format.
Yeah, so no, I cannot say that I've ever seen it. Just clips of it.
It has been on. I've seen it, and I can remember bootleg versions of it when I used to go to flea markets and kind of peruse to find. When DVDs first came out,
right?
They were like $30, and there was a guy set up this was in San Diego. There was a guy set up at this flea market that used to sell any DVD, $15, no tax, no nothing. Just so, I saw it out there on VHS, but it was a bootleg from China or the UK or something like that. I don't think it even played on, I don't know if they had blockout regions back in the day, but now if you buy a Region 2 movie, doesn't play on Region 1 players, etc.
Right.
So anyways, just why are we talking about that? That's why, because it's based on a movie called Song of the South.
Well, and the fact that we've both been Florida residents. We've both frequented the Disney parks, and with you across the world. So, it's got relevancy there too. And Splash Mountain actually is, kind of always been one of my
one of the best
favorite
rides.
attractions. Yeah.
Probably the longest ride still.
See, I said attractions, but I think I would change and say it's one of my favorite rides, because honestly, whenever I went through it, the theming of it, I was like, just get me to the drop, throw me over the edge of the cliff and let me.
Right.
So what are your thoughts when you read this?
When I first read it, and to get into it more, they're retheming it based on Princess and the Frog.
Which, have you seen that?
I have seen it. I have it on various.
Yeah, it's
DVD,
a great movie.
Yeah, and the lead princess, shockingly for Disney, is black. Of course, she still has a 2-inch waist and is gorgeous, but I don't think they're ever going to drop that. But so to me, the first thought was like, I don't know. Song that, I mean, the Splash Mountain's such a classic, and it plays zippity doo dah through the whole ride, which is that won the Academy Award for Best Song. And it's about this character. It's actually about a kid who moves to the woods, and he hears this guy singing in a very stereotypical black manner, and it becomes Uncle Remus, who is this like caretaker, I think, or he lives on the property and does work on the property.
Yeah, again, portrayed by James Baskett,
who won the Academy Award.
And Walt lobbied for that.
For his Academy Award?
His Academy Award, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you got to put a lot of this into context of the times. I mean, 1946, and then also context in terms of when the story takes place, and what the world looked like at that time too. And against the backdrop of what we're all experiencing right now.
Yes.
With Black Lives Matter.
Correct. And what's difficult is, again, it gets political, because you just mentioned this Black Lives Matter thing, and there's a lot of people that are, taking monuments down. And our current president, who I won't name, is against it. How do you take down Robert E. Lee? Well, he was a traitor to the country who lost the war. If Robert E. Lee won the war, God knows, what the world would look like right now. I mean, a lot of people, the war, the battle between the North and the South was about slavery. And
I think that's where we need to focus it is, again, here's the problem I had with it is when I read that release on the blog, it was that first statement that they make where they say, the Imagineers have been hard at work over the last year. Right. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever that first sentence said. And I think that's what I had the most problem with, because it does clearly seem like this has been in the works. You look at the concept art and all that, and you see all that stuff. But the timing of it,
yes,
and
seems a bit hypocritical.
Yeah, and the fact that it's some have said if the current climate wasn't what it was, would this have resulted in the movie having its own attraction independently? And, Splash Mountain wouldn't even be part of the conversation.
right, which it should. I mean, to me, that's kind of a cop out. Like, okay, yeah, let's re-skin, or because the ride isn't changing at all. Let's just change all the decorations. It's going to be the same ride, the same flume ride, except you're not going to see Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear and whoever the characters are. You're going to see the princess and the prince and all that.
Louis and yeah,
To
Tiana.
me, give them their own ride. But here's my caveat. If this ride offends people in today's climate, they probably grew up. They're probably not kids, because from my point of view, racism, you're not born a racist. It's something that is kind of they talk about nature nurture. To me, it's all about your surroundings, how you were brought up. That's what makes you a racist. And I used to think of this. Our dad used to be a mechanic. That's what he was for a living. And he owned a garage and a gas station locally. And I can remember working there I started working when I was 11. And I remember there was a daycare center down the street. And they used to walk the kids down the street every day. And there was this woman that walked the kids. It was really cute. And I used to kind of flirt with her. But there was
Hold
only
on a second. Hold on a second. You were 11? I'm just saying. That's a little.
Well, no. I started working there when I was 11.
Oh, you weren't flirting with her when you were 11.
I wasn't flirting her then. This was like years later.
Because then I'd say we'd have to be doing a whole different episode. But okay.
Yeah, exactly. And let's not go there.
So about that Me Too movement.
Yeah. So okay. that would be the episode. But I think we were she was a little older than me, but I was obviously driving at the time. We were close, like 2 or 3 years apart. But it's not about her. It was about her walking the kids. There was one black child, and the rest were white kids. And I used to watch the kids, the way they treated each other. And they used to hold hands. They used to hug each other a lot. And these kids, there wasn't a black kid in their vision. This was just another kid. And I remember thinking then how screwed up our country is, because even when you think one of our other favorite attractions, which is the American Adventure in Epcot, right? When the big Constitution comes down, all men are created equal. And I used to think, how could they write that? Thomas Jefferson, who I admire, how could he write that at a time him and his buddies owned slaves? Seems so hypocritical. Like I always used to think, did they not get this, that this doesn't make sense? And women haven't had the right to vote since 1950. I mean, our mother couldn't vote when she was first old enough to vote. And we're kind of, I don't mean to sidetrack away from the movie, but again, I think you brought it up. It's all around kind of what's going on now.
Well, and I think it goes back to, like, you made a comment about people that may be reacting in a certain. I think most people, this is my opinion, but I think most people that are reacting in a certain way about it, like more leaning more negative, is, probably just very much on the surface. This is, they've come to love Splash Mountain as it is. They like the theming as it is, and it doesn't go much deeper than that. But that completely ignores the historical context behind it, which I think is where the deeper argument comes from. It's like, if you don't know the history, then of course you're ignorant to the fact that it's just a ride. It's a big deal. Who cares? But if they make a decision, because they go on in that blog posts to say how, and they do acknowledge that now, of course, with the current climate, all the
Hmm.
protesting and stuff, that uh, it's this is a more inclusive um, concept and all of those things, which I agree it is. But where does that end? So like,
Well,
don't you then have to get rid of the Dumbo ride or retheme Dumbo, where you've got arguably stereotypical characters, crow characters. The main character of the crows in Dumbo is named
yeah,
Jim Crow. That's
right,
not a
right,
coincidence.
correct.
So, like, shouldn't that be like, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's where
and
it becomes a slippery slope for me.
I brought up Epcot, but they do deal with it in that that's an attraction. They do deal with it because, Frederick Douglass rides out and says, wait a second, this isn't equal, and they talk about slavery, and then all of a sudden there's a big, lightning bolt, and uh, this Native American comes out and says, I don't know what you're talking about here, these people are complaining about being slaves. How about us? You stole our land. And so they do deal with it. But another thing you don't remember is if we rewind to the 70s, and I remember this very, it's very vivid in my memory, is in the late 70s, and this came out in the Democratic debates about busing. And this was a big deal in Boston, which they were busing kids into different neighborhoods to try to make the schools. And here's a good example. I went to high school, and there was one African American kid in my class. 660 people graduated my class, one African American. That's shocking to me now. But I didn't really think about it then at the time. Nobody really brought it out. And, you know, you say, well, where do you draw the line? I think if you're African American, you know, the line seems to never get drawn. It's like those protests in the 70s were all about integration and doing the right thing, but it just went away. We had our little fights and there was a lot of rallies. Martin Luther King Jr. was, in his day was, a huge voice, one of the most brilliant writers I've ever read. And he died with his, before he was in jail. He wrote he wrote this unbelievable essay on the corners of a newspaper, which I don't know if you've read that, but it's absolutely spectacular and maybe the most articulate person I've ever read. And yet nothing ever changes. They talk about, like, you see all the commercials, and it's really kind of getting under my skin. Toyota loves everybody, and they're, all of a sudden Roger Goodell, who's kept, a black quarterback out of the NFL because he kneeled during the national anthem, had nothing to do with the national anthem, Mr. President. It was all about protesting equal rights. So now he's like, oh, Black Lives Matter to the NFL. I think Colin Kaepernick should get a shot. And I'm really getting off track here, but
Yeah, that's only because the pressure is being turned up so much right now.
is
I
that a
mean,
good thing? I
I think
mean,
I think it is a good thing. I think we're just not we've not really. I mean, I certainly haven't witnessed anything quite like this in my lifetime. So, uh,
yeah. And for me, this is kind of the third, fourth time around where we get to a point, and look at the way the president's reacting, throwing out dog whistles. He's backed by all the KKK people, so he doesn't want things to change. You know, our vice president was asked directly by a reporter this week to say Black Lives Matter. Can you say that, Mr. Vice President? He would not say it. He refused to say it. He took the little swerve of, well, you know, we believe all Americans and we're working hard for everybody. Just say it, you know, you racist clown. And to me, I think if you ride this ride and it offends you, I think that says more about you than the ride. You know, or if it doesn't offend you, you know, maybe we're the ones that were still ignorant, you know.
Well, see, I would say if it, I don't know, there's the line, there's the debate. I think I'm almost on the side if it doesn't offend you, although I say that and in the same breath acknowledge that hasn't bothered me. But again,
Right.
Here we are with our white privilege.
Right.
It never had to bother us. And so
Right.
it's certainly, I don't have that experience. I don't have that perspective. I can't speak to it. It's really just to say on the surface level, or the main issue that we were talking about, Splash Mountain.
Yeah.
We get off talking about
in Song of the South,
an election, for God's sakes. But
right.
We knew, like you said at the beginning, how are we not going to talk politically in this episode? It is what it is, you know. But
right.
but it's important to talk about, and I think, you know, I don't personally have a problem with it. I'm not like, oh, up in arms that they're changing my Splash Mountain or something
Correct.
like that.
I don't care either.
It's just, but you know, but it's interesting because it made me sort of go back and say, okay, well, what else is there that is maybe problematic? And there's quite a bit, and not only with race. I mean, there's, you know, I was reading articles where it points out some pretty interesting depictions in movies that could be considered stereotypical for like the LGBTQ community. And, you know, so it kind of opens up this much larger conversation. And
and do we erase all of, like, what about the Academy Awards that were given? Do those get nullified?
Well, the award shows are ridiculous anyways. Why do we even have those?
I know.
That's the question. But I went on to Disney Plus and I pulled up Dumbo after kind of, you know, looking into like I said, a list of some of these other problematic areas of Disney films and things. And sure enough, on Disney Plus, in the description, it says may contain or does contain outdated cultural references, is how they put it. And in other words, has some stereotypical racist material, is what it should say.
And I also heard that Song of the South was being revamped for release, I think in 2021. They were going to re-release it and take out, I guess, the racist stuff, which it's so, I mean, it's so prevalent. Then it's not.
But do you take it out? Do you take it out, or is what some people I've heard say, what you do is you leave it in, but then you use that as an opportunity to educate.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not sure that's for me to commentate on.
See, and there goes to not the white privilege, but the white man's burden kind of thought, like, oh God, is this my fault? You know, I mean, both of us have had discussions about race and our upbringing, and we were both, you know, as two guys that are pretty educated and went to really nice schools, and at a time where they weren't diversified like they are now. We go back now for events, and the school's much more diversified than it was then. But we learned a lot when we were in college. And I think we've both talked about it. But did we ever once go on Splash Mountain and say, hey, man, this is really racist? You know, they need to change this ride.
No, and again, because we didn't have to. We didn't have to, it didn't even have to come into our consciousness.
Yeah. And where were, shouldn't people have been protesting this ride since the opening?
Well,
Why today? Is it because of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I
That
think we could
taken a
probably,
look at it?
we could, I mean, they probably have, maybe not this loudly, but I'm sure if we went back, we would see there have been times over the years where, I mean, it's no secret that's been written about. There's all kinds of articles that I saw from years past that have called
And
up.
it's
Well, at the time the movie was released, right? Because
right,
that was Jim Crow segregation. I mean,
correct.
it played in an all white theater, so you know,
And, I'm not going to bang on Disney too much because they've been in front of most things. I mean, they've had Gay Pride Day for as long as I can remember. From the time, and I worked there in what, 86. And
yeah, not on that issue, but on the issue of race,
right,
then I think no. You got, I mean, just case in point, Walt certainly could have said, no, we're not going to screen this movie. The premiere is not going to be in it all. I don't know what options you would have had back then
right,
in
right.
1946, but it certainly could have taken a stand, but that wasn't the world. But that goes to, I think, another point I wanted to bring up, which is it's the systemic nature of all of this that you have to look at. Like, is Splash Mountain going to end racism in America? No. I don't care what the theming is.
Right.
It's going to make some of us feel better about ourselves, maybe like us with our
Right.
complexion. Maybe, well, isn't that nice that that's nice that they
Yeah.
changed Splash Mountain. Yeah, they should have done that a long time ago, but it doesn't change anything.
And then I look at the song being played, won an Academy Award, the actor, the black actor who was, he certainly could have read the script and said, no, this is way too over the top and stereotypical. Instead, he wins the Academy Award, and I thought it brought attention to it, the issue. And I think that's how Walt looked at it was, oh, this is good. I don't know. It's a tough one. And like you said, do we go through and, hey, yeah, okay, let's go down Main Street and then let's put a train track and then
Hmm.
let's cross the tracks and put a Main Street and, some African American community, which didn't look like Walt's from Kansas City, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. It's a difficult. I think if you're going to do that, I think you have an obligation then to go back and reevaluate everything.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I agree. I think you have to look at every attraction, every ride, and say, hey, does this cross the line? And then you start talking, is this the same park? Is this, well, no, it isn't. It's the park in the year 2020.
and I don't know again if any of that even makes a difference, but I just think, you mentioned kind of hypocritical the way that they announced it or whatever, but I don't know.
And I want to be on the right side of history. And I struggle. Like you said, they change it to Princess and the Frog. I'm gonna still get in line and go on the ride and enjoy it. Um, will it make me, well, now it will conjure up, racism when I go on the ride and I think, oh yeah, that's where they used to dunk Brer Bear. Now it's a prince, with his
It's
saber or whatever,
a trumpet playing alligator.
Yeah, exactly. So, but certainly I'm going to go on the ride And maybe that's a good thing. I'm going to start thinking about, hey, they changed this attraction because it was based on a racist movie that had racial stereotypes in it. But then do we change? It's funny you mentioned Disney Plus, because if you go on there, they have a category, Black Lives. So you
Mhm.
can watch these historical movies from African Americans or people who, um, were significant to the African American community. Is that, I don't know. When is this going to stop? I don't know.
It reminds me of there was when I was in my undergrad studying sociology, there was a term that I learned of by one of my professors, and I want to say it was in a Kurt Vonnegut book, and the term was semirotrophia, if I recall correctly. It was basically, like the way people give to charity because it makes them feel good about themselves.
Right,
You
right,
know, this almost is kind of what these things feel like you even said the Disney Plus, and you can see like everybody's doing that. You go to Prime Video and you see,
right.
well, why weren't you doing that all along? Why does it have to be a spot? It's like Black History Month, and
The the
yeah,
word that comes to mind for me is altruistic. You know, how can you truly be altruistic if you give money to charity and it makes you feel good? Well, it doesn't really meet the definition of being altruistic. So we could go on for another, hour, which nobody, everybody's going to shut it off at that point. But
well, but I think I've heard, it's what a lot of people are talking about right now. I mean,
it is.
it obviously wasn't just as simple as, oh, Disney announces they're changing the theme into Splash Mountain. You know,
Yes.
maybe in
Yes.
any other time nobody would have cared about that, but right now, and it's interesting because I think people's reactions are probably different than they would have been if
Yes.
all of this other stuff wasn't going on.
So where do you fall, or how do you, to conclude this, what's your feeling?
I mean, I have no problem with it, I'm always down for change when it comes to, again, specifically when it comes to Disney, and I'm always open to that. Like, there's so much changing right at the parks right now with Epcot and all these overhauls, which, yeah, granted, they've been slowed down now because of the COVID-19 and everything. But so I don't have a problem from that standpoint. But I think to what you said before, it it's going to probably raise my awareness more, where I'm going to be maybe more mindful about, the messaging and the branding and the things that I see, and would I speak up about those things? I
Yeah.
wonder. If in other words, would I patronize a place that I believe maybe isn't on the right side of history or falls short in some areas? I'm not saying that about Disney per se. I just it'll give me that cause to pause and think through some of those things maybe a little bit more deeply. But I go to Disney to escape, and for that kind of feeling of always connecting with my childhood and this and that. But this is now, I mean, we're having a sociological conversation, so
Right.
it's bigger than the theme parks.
Right.
It's bigger than that.
What about the movie? Should they re-release it and with all
Well,
these edits?
I'll tell you what, I think that's a really difficult thing, because I feel like I'll give you another example of something that I actually have enjoyed over the years during Christmas time is two movies really, White Christmas and Holiday Inn. Bing Crosby and Fred
Hmm.
Astaire, and I believe it's White Christmas is the film where one of the most racist scenes in a movie, ironically called White Christmas, but that you could ever see. And, really stereotypical depictions of African Americans and a blackface, actually.
Hmm.
And I will say, when I watch it now, I cringe when I see that. It does make me a little uncomfortable. And they've since, when they air it, a lot of times you won't see that version of it. You'll see an edited version of it.
Right.
But to your question, I mean, I think I don't know. I'm a little on the fence about that, because in one respect, I feel like, yeah, there needs to be some corrective action, for lack of a better phrase. But then I think, yeah, but it also makes me think of a great line from the movie Braveheart, which is the very opening. You hear William the Bruce, or Robert the Bruce, rather. His character says, history was written by those who've hanged heroes. And I
Hmm.
think, that whitewashed uh, version of history that we got when we were going to school, it didn't
Hmm.
tell us about, did we learn about slavery when we went to elementary and middle? No,
Hmm.
it wasn't until I was going to college and
Hmm.
had more life experience that I learned about those things. So I don't know if that stuff should remain, and we should learn about the history, for better or for worse, where we came from, the good, the
Right.
bad, the ugly. I probably tend to lean towards that, but I don't know. Is that easy for me to say, because I've always been on
Yeah.
the right side of it?
To me, I think the film shouldn't be, you know, blackwashed or whatever you want to call it. I think they present it the way it was, but there should also be
A disclaimer.
a disclaimer. And also, along with that, when the movie's finished, in the extras, or I don't know if you can do it within, I think it would disrupt the movie if you all of a sudden cut a certain scene and say, yeah, this depiction right here of him whittling or whatever. I think at the end of the movie there should be a discussion.
Yeah,
And
documentary
yeah,
that is forthright, honest, candid about what
but
they've
how
learned.
many people will watch that and just,
But that, I think, therein lies the problem in our country right now,
yeah,
is we're right. It's the same reason. And if you're listening to this episode right now, still, kudos to you.
yeah,
But in all seriousness, I would think, if anybody's made it this far, they're open to at least hearing some different perspectives on it, as
yeah,
opposed to, you got your heels dug in on one side or the other. And
right,
look, this turned into be, I thought we are going to have a very, not light conversation, but a much lighter conversation about a theme park changing at Disney.
right,
And next thing you know, we're talking about Jim Crow slavery and segregation and all these things. But
yeah,
I would agree with you. I think that would be a way to handle it.
yeah.
Because there's also something about well, I don't know. I would be interested to hear from some of the people that were involved in some of these projects, and really what they think about it. You
It's
know,
funny because I love classic movies and black and white movies, and there's always, the white people always have servants and maids and, butlers, and, these aren't rich people necessarily. They're just white. And I think that was the difference, you know? So I think, I think if they changed the movie, you would lose the historical perspective and it would kind of be a slap in the face. But am I allowed to say that because I'm white? I
well,
guess
and
that's not.
but that's the thing too, right? The depiction of that time in history in the movie isn't even. That's the argument, is that it's not even factual. It represents an idyllic version of
That time.
life on a plantation at that time and everything. I
Correct.
mean, it's so.
Because the movie was filmed in 46, but it's based on the book was the 1800s, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So
Okay.
if you but I think that's one way to do it. Like you said, you throw a documentary on there, and it's forthcoming about what is and what isn't shown and told. And and then you draw your own conclusions from there.
Yep.
Well, that's another episode in the books. And if you want to drop us a line, I would really love, if you're listening, and I know you've mentioned this before, but I know we have some listeners in France, and I would love to hear from them if they're listening to this episode, and drop us a line. You can email us at ohbpodcast@gmail.com. We're on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We've got a YouTube channel. We'd love for you to go there and subscribe and hit the notification.
You're on Tinder.
Well, that's an inactive account.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I will be editing that out. that won't see the final cut of this episode. So that'll be edited, but so you can find us there. We definitely love to. You can call us too and leave us a voicemail. We'd even feature it on a future episode if it's not too hateful. 407-476-8781. Again, you can drop us a line, give us a call, 407-476-8781. And we'd just love to hear from you. And so we appreciate you guys listening, and we'd love for you to follow us on social media if you're not already. And just let us know what your thoughts are about this or any other episode we've done. And we appreciate you listening. And that's been another episode. And we will see you next week, folks.
Bye, everyone.